Welcome back to Daybreak Live, final half hour of the show on this TGIF Friday morning. Chad Spradley joins us this morning, and Chad is just releasing his first book, A Long Road to Redemption. Chad, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you here with us this morning. Who is Chad Spradley?
Chad Spradley's a complicated guy. He's worked in small business. He's been a teacher for about 17 years total, starting in the community college at Jefferson State. Fairly recently at Saraland High School, Talladega County Central High School, and now at Pell City High School.
Okay, so you've been around a little bit, haven't you?
Been around a little bit.
Who's your family?
My mother is Renee Spradley. My father is Ben Spradley.
He's been on the show before.
He has been on the show, indeed.
A few years ago.
It's been a little while. Wife Jennifer, daughter Anna Claire, and you actually interviewed my son Braxton for Star Student of the month. And I'm telling you, all he could talk about was how the TV guy loved the Red Sox.
That's right.
So it was a big deal for him.
Now, your first book, A Long Road to Redemption, how did you get started writing?
It was a strange thing, really, because I was actually playing a video game version of the board game Clue, actually. And with the game Clue, you know the where, you know the how, but you don't know the why. And this one particular character ended up being the main villain of that particular game. I was like, well, why in the world would this person do this? And so they kind of blossomed from there, and that's kind of what got me started writing, was the fact that, why would someone do this? What was the motive behind what they did?
How do you jumpstart into writing? You're a school teacher, an educator. How did you blend that with your writing skills?
Well, I've always wanted to write. I started writing a long time ago, really, when I was in high school. Miss Judy McSween is probably one of the first people to encourage my writing back when I was a senior in high school. And I kind of had to put it on the shelf for a long time because essentially I'm writing what other people want me to write. You're in school, grad school, and so you're reading things you don't want to read sometimes, and you're writing things you don't want to write, or they're making you write. But I always loved it, and I started writing again several years ago, just little short stories, usually around Halloween time for my kids at school. And I had a kid come up to me and say, you know what, you should really write a book. I said, well, I don't know that I have time for that. And then the pandemic struck, and then I had time for it.
You had plenty of time.
I had a lot of time.
A Long Road to Redemption. Now, this particular book is Chad's first writing, and when did you start to get serious about your writing skills and about writing books?
Well, the first real serious thing I've written since grad school was an essay on Vietnam. And basically I sat down looking for classroom sources, and there just wasn't a whole lot there. I said, well, you know what, why not just write them? And so I did, and I don't know that my students appreciated it too much. It ended up being 20 pages long, and they didn't necessarily want to, but some of them actually did read it, and it was a kind of a jump start, I guess.
This book, Sydney Lewis,
Yes.
A young, attractive 22-year-old woman. Talk about this character.
She's kind of a shy character. She's someone who's very, very book smart, but she's not very skilled in ways of things outside of a faith community in some ways. She grew up in a very Bible-believing home. She goes to a Bible college, and she kind of meets someone almost by accident, and they end up falling in love. It's a good match, and then only to discover that his family's hiding something, and it's a fairly dark family secret that they have, and she gets herself involved in it unwittingly, ending up even facing a conviction for a crime she didn't even commit. And so the book kind of centers around her attorney, who's a family friend, and a detective that believes her, and a news reporter who all are trying to clear her name. And that's kind of the big story of the book.
A Long Road to Redemption by author Chad Spradley. Who encouraged you to write?
Well, my first encouragement was, as mentioned, Miss Judy McSween at Childersburg High School, is where I graduated. And she just basically came up to me one day and said, I've read some of your stuff, and you should really try to develop that talent. And every now and again, even to this very day, she'll ask me, Chad, how's your writing coming? Well, Miss McSween, I'm doing okay. So, for Judy McSween, yes, I'm doing okay with my writing now.
Where can they get the book?
It's available on Amazon. You can get it either in the printed version or the digital version. It's also at Barnes & Noble. You can find it on the Google Play Store and on iTunes as well. And pretty much almost anywhere that sells books can order it for you.
So when was this book released?
Officially about 3-4 weeks ago, probably right at a month. It's been available since January, but more or less it's made its debut about a month ago.
When you got the proof for the book, many changes in the original?
The book went through a lot of changes, to be honest. When I first started writing, the things in Ferguson, Missouri had happened, and then later over that summer, the George Floyd incident happened, and that changed things quite a bit. Because the last thing I wanted to do was, put law enforcement in a bad light. I did not want to do that at all. So I had to be a little sensitive to that a little over the time. And the character started out in a very different arc. It was going to be a very different story at first, and the more I got to writing the character, the more I got to thinking, no, this character wouldn't do that. So I actually had to start completely over.
And that's not so uncommon with book writers.
Not uncommon at all. As a matter of fact, with the sequel and the third one I'm working on that's also in the series, there's been a lot of redrafts. As a matter of fact, my wife told me this morning, I've got the pages for your latest one, and I got to tell you, we got to make some changes. Well, that's what this is about, so it's okay. It's all right.
Who is your support system for your writing?
Definitely my wife. She is, Jennifer is an amazing person, and I couldn't ask for someone better to, kind of prod me on. My daughter, Anna Claire, she's actually running my social media campaign right now, because who better to run social media?
How old is she?
She's 15.
Okay.
She is, my goodness, she's starting to drive, and I'm a little worried, but she actually runs my social media campaign, and who better to run social media than a teenager, because they know way more about it than the rest of us do.
No doubt about it.
And of course, my son Brax, I can't forget to mention him. He encourages me too, although he's more the athlete of the family.
Yeah. Long Road to Redemption, Chad Spradley, author this morning, joined us on Daybreak Live. So you mentioned the sequel. What is next?
Well, what is next? Well, we follow the case of the detective that's mentioned. His name is Roger Taylor. We follow him in the story, and basically it's kind of how he deals with the events of Long Road, how the fallout from what happened. Sorry, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but the events that happened in Long Road, how he deals with them, and how the after effects, and a lot of things have changed. There's people who only got bare mentioning in the first book. They're now in more prominent roles. We're trying to introduce new characters, and you see the old characters come back a little bit as well. But it's mostly more or less in the sequel, it's more or less he has a case to solve. And so we follow him along as he tries to do that.
Is there a rule of thumb, Chad, from one release to the other as far as a time frame is concerned?
Well, it's a long process when it comes to publication. This one I started writing it in April of 2020 and finished it in August. So the writing process is long and sometimes a very tedious process, if you will, especially after you've done a revision 2 or 3 times by that point. And so you try to do what you can to keep the core center of the story. And you've got to remember too that as far from a writing standpoint, it's about the people. You can have a great plot, but if your people are not very interesting, then nobody's really going to care. So I try to focus it on people, and I tell people, I want you to imagine that if you walked into your local Walmart or your local grocery store, that you could actually see Sydney buying groceries or Roger doing an investigation somewhere. I want these people to feel real.
Yeah, so I was about to say, how do you build the characters?
you have to give them some depth. You have to give them a backstory. All these characters have a backstory. If you bring in somebody and it's just this person's here and then they walk off, they're not very memorable. But Roger, for example, well, he's an Iraqi war veteran. He had a friend that was also in Iraq who lost a leg in Iraq, and they bond together. The town has to have a certain depth to it. There's a sense of, you have the chain restaurants and the various other things too, but you have a very local feel to it as well, almost as if it's an actual real place. And that's the thing, is I wanted people that if they went through any town USA, that could almost be Warrenton. It could almost be where you might expect to see these characters live. And I think just the depth of character and the idea that, you know, these people have a real purpose in life, that's really what I was looking for when I wrote this book.
Does the community that we live in, does it play a role in your writing?
There's definitely some influences there. The faith-based community, I'm a member of First Baptist Church here in Sylacauga. I live in Sylacauga, and so there is definitely that sense of community. And you know, here in Sylacauga, like I said, you have the chain restaurants, you have your fast food, but you also have some very, very good local places here too. And so I try to focus in the book on some of those local places to kind of give you this idea, like you're reading this and man, I want to go there. So definitely the local community, and I lived in Mobile for 3 years while I was at Saraland. And so there's a flavor of Mobile in there as well. The idea that, you know, Warrenton's about an hour from the beach, Mobile's about an hour from the beach. So it has a very Mobile vibe too. And I kind of describe it as kind of a mixture of Sylacauga, Mobile kind of thrown in together. Although it's set in California, I still think it's very relatable. Kind of feel, you know, because California is a very diverse place. You know, you have your ultra liberal bastions in San Francisco, but you also have some places that are very relatable to Alabama and some very relatable places around the country.
You mean there's some conservative?
Believe it or not, they do exist. They do exist. There are, believe it or not, there are Christian schools in California.
Wow.
I mean, I did a lot of research on the place, and I've been there a couple of times. And it's actually a great state. Once
Who will read this book?
I think anybody who likes a good mystery, if you like Hallmark mysteries, it's probably one for you. Although I'd really tried to kind of avoid some of the Hallmark mystery tropes. You know, how you find the villain and the villain confesses immediately. Okay, I tried to avoid a little bit of that. But anyone who likes a good mystery, anybody who likes some adventure, suspense, the idea that, you know, is this someone you can trust? Is it not someone you can trust?
Easy read?
Pretty easy read. I wouldn't say it's overly complex. I wrote it to almost to where almost anybody could enjoy it, and that's really what I want in the long run. Is I want people to read it, and I want them to enjoy it and relate to it.
Chad Spradley, our guest this morning, A Long Road to Redemption. Speaking of long-term writing, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Oh gosh. It's funny to think of myself as a John Grisham. I don't know that I'm him. I mean, that's a big high expectation. I hope by maybe 10 years out, maybe I've got a very loyal fan base. You know, some place that I'm in a place where I'm reaching a lot of people and interacting with a lot of people. I actually have my first book signing next Thursday for the ADK group in Talladega, and I'm really excited about that.
That's going to be different. Yeah.
It will be. I'm not really, you know, I'm not really used to celebrity treatment, to be honest. I've taught high school and various other places for a long time, and the idea that, you know, people are actually coming to see me for something I wrote is just a great thrill.
No doubt about it.
That's just an amazing thing, really.
Chad Spradley, A Long Road to Redemption. Chad, our guest this morning, local guy who is doing well in his writings. And again, where can they get the book?
Amazon is probably the place where most people are getting it from, but Barnes & Noble should also have it. iTunes, Google Play. And you can find me on my Instagram page, chad.spradley. And I am on Facebook, and you'll find links to the book there as well.
Before we go, there may be people watching throughout the state this morning who have contemplated writing, and they may have done some of the same thing you've done, short stories and stuff like that. How do they go the next step in writing a book?
I think the biggest step is really just kind of disciplining yourself to manage your time, because writing is a very complex, very time-consuming thing. This book is not on the level of something like The Stand, and yet it still took 4 months to actually, from idea to completion. So it's the time factor, I think, that's the biggest challenge for any writer. But you really have to kind of want to love what you do. You've got to really kind of get to know your character. And even though they're not real, they're not someone that you're going to see on the streets, you have to treat them as if they are. They act in a certain way, they react in a certain way, and there's certain things that they just will not do. And you can't violate that character, that idea that this person stands for this and they won't violate it. And if they do, you better have a very good reason. But I think the biggest challenge is the time factor. I think time is always going to be the challenge.
Well, we appreciate your time this morning. A long road to redemption with Chad Spradley. And we thank Chad for being with us this morning. We've got much more to do on Daybreak Live. Don't go away.